Let's go. All right, this week on the big show, as the year comes to a close, we take one last opportunity to celebrate. In a year filled with so many good films, we'll spotlight some of the year's best films and performances. Plus, we'll take a look back at some of the stars we lost this year. We'll have all that and more on episode 520 of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I was going to say the last Keeping It Real with FilmGordon of 2022. I am joined by my brothers, Charles Kirkland Jr. Happy holidays to you, sir.
Well, happy Merry to you, Tim. How's everything?
Man, you just can never get a good response to a greeting, man. I just don't understand what it is. It should be instinctual, but it's not cool. Watch this. Wilson, happy holidays to you, Wilson.
It's good to be on.
See how smooth that was, man? See what I'm saying? Anyway, we getting started early, man. Welcome to the show. We got a lot of content to go over today, including the top 10 movies of the year. Even though my colleagues, some of them did 5, some of them did 7. We will have a top 10 list before we get off the air today. Plus, I want to take a look back in memoriam. I wrote a piece on my site the other day about stars we lost this year. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge some of these giants, man, that transitioned in 2022. And it was one more thing I wanted to open the show with today. I saw today, I guess in the trades, that Bill Cosby is planning a touring schedule for 2023. Wilson Morales has that look on his face. Charles Kirkland, anybody. I was like, whoa, Bill, who'd you talk to? Where's the audience for this?
He's gonna start off with the Snoop quote, "I'm innocent. I'm innocent. Let's go."
Hey, man, I mean, maybe he might hit that, but I just thought we're not gonna spend a lot of time on it. I just thought, like, I saw that, I was like, damn,
hey.
It's not going to be "I'm innocent." He's going to say, "I's free. I's free."
You know, if Will Smith can put out his movie this year, you know, anything can happen. You know,
Will Smith had a movie this year. Will Smith had a movie to come out this year.
We'll put out a movie this year, man, even though it didn't get a lot of publicity.
trying to get the comeback of the year.
And also
gotta wait 10 years.
Right. And I was going to say, and also before we move on, today is Denzel Washington's birthday. I can't say anything about the GOAT. You know, this dude, to me, is not only one of the greatest actors of his generation, but 40 years Denzel's been putting in work. And he's probably, for my estimation, made maybe 5 bad movies in 40 years. We talk about it all the time, man. He is unparalleled in his ability to not just pick roles, but to pick roles that I think that are tailored specifically to him. Wilson, I'll start with you, man. I know you've been covering Denzel. You know, I'm not gonna say since the beginning of his career, but you've covered a lot of the highlights of Denzel's career, man. As he celebrates a birthday today, man, what type of legacy is Denzel building?
You know, the thing is, it's still not ending. You know, you would think at this point in time, you know, we lost Sidney Poitier this year. The good thing about when Sidney passed away is that the legacy had passed. You know, what he put together had passed on, you know, and picked up by Denzel. You know, and along the way, you have Will Smith, and now you still have had other actors in lead roles in other positions. Jamie Foxx, Forrest Whitaker's guys have won Oscars, but no one's carried the legacy what Denzel does. You know, in terms of like still has that presence 40 years later. That when he does a movie, you're saying you're going to go see it. He could be 80 years old, and you're going to see it because he's going to give you the same what he's been giving you for years. You know, he's going to give you, you know, whether it's Training Day 20 years later, or even you think about the little things, you know, the one he did last year, you were intrigued. The story may have been kind of flawed, but you were still intrigued to see how it's going to be played out because you have Denzel. He is the X factor in all his movies.
Charles Kirkland, man, Denzel Washington, man, 40 years. This is his birthday today. I wouldn't even disrespect Denzel by trying to do a top 5 list because it's
No
literally
point.
impossible. You can't pick 5 Denzel Washington
Impossible.
movies.
It's impossible.
You can't do it.
We had a discussion a couple weeks back about Michael Jackson, about what the best song on the Thriller album is, and it's like picking, I don't know, flipping dice or whatever you want to do. There's no way you can actually pick what his best movie is, his best top 5. It's just ridiculous because he's a consummate professional. Every time he steps up to the plate, he knocks it out of the park. Except for maybe, like you said, 3 or 4 movies, and I don't really blame those 3 or 4 movies on him. I blame it on bad scripts that he took that he accepted. So anytime Denzel comes onto the screen, like Wilson said, it's an event. And we had Terrence Howard, who said he's going to retire from acting. Denzel will never retire from acting. I don't think there's going to be a time where we'll never see him act as long as he's alive. And much like Sidney Poitier, he keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. So happy birthday to the man. And I can say that now because there is no greater actor in this time of age right now than Denzel Washington. So happy birthday. Keep it going. Keep it strong. Keep it tight. And now he's got a second generation coming up after him. So, hey, not only does we have him, we have his legacy. So there we go.
But the thing is, just to kind of go back, I don't know if you're saying, but you said, like I said, you mentioned you're talking about his son.
Yeah.
I think it takes time. I don't want to start granting it because that's a lot of pressure to be put on his son. He's got to build his own fame to the point where we got to say John David as opposed to let's not think about his last name, even though it got him there, but let him start building it up on his own because you got to remember Denzel's early careers, no one's going to, Tim would know more of the early works that, they weren't that favorable. He wasn't like he came out the bat and was like hitting home runs right away,
Well,
so,
you talking about Denzel.
If you think of,
are you talking about Denzel?
You can talk about John David, but you can also talk about Chiwetel Ejiofor and all these guys who've been influenced by Denzel throughout the years. Who he's
because he was the only guy. He was the only guy that you could only be looking up to. You could say influence. There was no one else. On a consistent level.
Right. Well, I think the thing about Denzel Washington's career, if you really look at it, he of course did Carbon Copy in '81, and then I think he was doing Saint Elsewhere, and then I guess he had been on Broadway doing The Soldier's Play, and when they brought it to film, he did A Soldier's Story. But the thing that's interesting about Denzel Washington, and I was looking through, because I put up a piece on IG this afternoon about his birthday. Denzel Washington's career is so distinct that he not only played in all these movies, but you can literally remember the characters that he played. So, of course, he played Malcolm. He played Private Trip in Glory, Peterson in Soldier's Story. I mean, and on and on and on it goes, man. You think about all these characters that he played. You know them by name, man. Frank Lucas, an American Gangster. That's Denzel Washington, man. Keith.
What was his character's name in Training Day?
Oh, Alonzo. What was Alonzo's last name?
Right.
But his name was Alonzo.
Right.
I know that much. I can't remember the last name of the character.
I think it was Alonzo Wright.
Yeah. Was it Alonzo Wright?
Alonzo Wright.
Was Alonzo? I didn't know that, but I knew it was Alonzo. But I go on to say that to illustrate a point that, when you talk about Keith Frazier and the Inside Man, I mean, I remember these characters that Denzel plays, man. So
what was his name in Lincoln Frost? What was his name in Lincoln? In Safe House. In Safe House.
Oh man, you said it was something Frost.
Was it Lincoln?
I don't know if it was Lincoln Frost. He was Lincoln in the Bone Collector. I remember that part.
Right.
Yeah, but Wilson, you following me. You figured out that we know this man's work so distinctly, man, that you think about him not just in characters, but in character names. Reuben Hurricane Carter in the Hurricane, and on and on. But I wanted to pivot before we get into the top 10 movies of the list. I mean, of the list of the top 10 movies of the year, to talk about some of the stars we lost, and I'm just going to go through some of these names, man. Irene Cara, of course, was a big one, man. You know, we talked about her several weeks ago, or whenever it happened. I think it was last month. Huge loss, man. You know, Flashdance, Fame. She was a singer, Sparkle. Had a very. Go ahead, Wilson.
DC Cab, Aaron Loves Angela.
Oh, absolutely. Aaron Loves Angela. I've seen that movie.
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nichelle Nichols, man, who played Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, man. She was a pioneer and a groundbreaker. And we went through that during that period. David A. Arnold, which was really, really sad to me because this guy literally, Wilson, earlier this summer dropped a Netflix special. I was watching it. And within 60 days, he was gone. I was like, damn. So he never got a chance to really, because this was kind of his breakthrough. Charles, would you acknowledge that was kind of his breakthrough?
Yeah.
Kind of special. So he did a Robin Harris, man, right when he was on the verge.
Right. Yeah.
Just gone, man.
Right out of my mouth. He reminded me of Robin Harris. Just as he's getting to the point of fame, he's gone. It was terrible.
And here is one just from last week, Tom Bell, who's a singer, composer, songwriter for the Delphonics, Stylistics, and Spinners, all groups that Wilson will swear he's never heard any of these groups.
When people look for those things that they put on the floor and they'll pick it up 25 years later, Tim was one of those people. They didn't pick up rocks, they didn't pick up books, they picked up him. Okay,
man. That's Wilson, man. Just always being an ageist on the show. Of course, we lost Stephen Twitch Boss, of course, very sad earlier this month. Clarence Gilliard, who was he played in Top Gun, and he also was the computer expert in Die Hard. Remember him, the brother?
And he was on Walker, Texas Ranger.
Walker, Texas Ranger, yeah. Let me see. Coolio, we lost this year. Wilson just put out a list of Black directors, and Denise Dowles was on there.
So is B. Bendelli, the director of The Horsemen. I'm saying the name wrong. Who was just playing on Netflix. He died early at the age of 54.
Yep. Wow. Torian Black from Hill Street Blues. And then we had a series of some really good ones. Johnny Brown, who played Bookman on Good Times. Mary Alice, wow. I mean, Mary Alice, I talked about this when we did our tribute to her. She played mothers like 40 years ago. Like when she was a young woman, she was playing a mama. She played a mama in Sparkle in 1970.
I remember her Beat Street.
Right. She always played the mama. Right. If they wanted a mama, they always cast Mary Alice in every film. Laurel Avenue, she was the mama. Like, so Mary Alice gone this year. Betty Davis.
A lot of people remember her from A Different World.
Oh, yeah, Letty. Yep. Betty Davis, I was talking about, not the actress Betty Davis, but the singer that was married to Miles Davis. Sonia Edie. Roger Earl Mosley. It's really funny. I was watching a couple of old blaxploitation films, and he was in both of them, and I was like, damn. Yeah, so the timing on that was really good. And then we get to the GOAT himself, the one that kind of shook me, Sidney Poitier, man. I remember his death early this year, man. I think I was out of it for almost 2 weeks because you had the steady stream of dedications. And I was so glad that Reggie Hudlin made the doc and got all of that information in before he passed. When you talk about Sidney, which we will talk about, that's a tip because we're talking about the best movies of the year. So we will be talking about Sidney, the documentary coming up. So that was the list of some of the stars that we lost this year. Wilson, I know you added one. Charles, do you have anybody that I left out that you wanted to add?
No, I don't. I don't like to look back at the losses because it just is profoundly depressing sometimes when you lose such great talent. And so, I just say thank you for all they've done for us, and I try to keep it moving.
No, I got you. And same thing with Wilson, man. All right, so here we go, guys. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something different. Does everybody have 10, or is some people have 5, some people have 7? You guys all got 10?
I can scrounge up 10. I can mentally grab. I got 10.
Round up 10. So
I
my
I
problem
got
is that I got
25.
to say that again.
I got 25.
Oh, okay. Well, if you got 25 this year, something's wrong with you, but that's another story. Uh, so I've got to shave 3 off my list, man. So let me just go with the ones that I think are no doubters. I had, well, I got a couple. So I have a couple of lists because I've got a documentary list and I got a regular list. So how about
See,
that?
Tim doesn't say 10. He just got, I got a documentary
Yeah, I got
list.
a doc list, man. So I'm gonna start off because I'm in no particular order this year. I'm gonna go to a film that I know all of us have seen, and I think that this director, this storytelling, as well as the visual effects make this to me like a slam dunk. And I'm going to start off with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I love this movie, man. I've watched that movie like 4 or 5 times, and it still kind of gets me here, man. I really, really, really like that movie. And I'm just going to name about 3, and then I'm going to pass the mic. I'm going to go with. I know this sounds dumb, but I'm putting this on my list, man. Top Gun Maverick, which I saw the original like a couple of days before I saw the screening, and I've watched this film several times. It's just really good storytelling, man. I hate to say it. I mean, I know it's a big budget film. It's Tom Cruise. It's the nostalgia from the '86 film to this one. It's a really good film. It's a really
Tom Gordon. Why would you say
why are you being disrespectful, man? Because all of us have choices, man. Let me live in my choice.
Saying, why would you say it's a sounds like a stupid pick or a silly pick?
It sounds like a stupid pick because in a regular year, if we had like the films that I think that normally play, this movie would be a good film, but it wouldn't be one of the top 10 of the year. I'm just telling you because
it's my number one.
Well, I don't have a number one, man. I just wrote them out in different orders, and I'm just going to stop with the Woman King because that's going to be the 3 that I'm going to go through. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Top Gun Maverick, and the Woman King. I don't even need to explain the Woman King. You guys have seen it. So those are my 3. Charles Kirkland, what do you have for 3 of yours?
All right. So first of all, I don't know why we're talking about the best of this year, so we can only evaluate what we have. We can't evaluate what could be from next year or last year or whatever. So I think Top Gun is a solid pick. It's number 3 on my list, but it's right there in the top 5. I think everybody agrees how great that movie was. But for me, I put Glass Onion as my number 1 film. I love that film. Up and down, back and forth, over and over again. I've seen it. I've seen it maybe 3 times now, and I just entreated my family to it. It's a great movie, and I love mysteries. So when Ryan Johnson put this together, I was all in from the last movie. So we got this one, and I thought this movie. I've seen it again, and I agree. This movie is much better than the first one. So I enjoyed Glass Onion. I got Everything Everywhere All at Once on my list. I thought the Daniels were this is a creative story, very out of the box. Anything I see with Michelle Yeoh doing martial arts in it, I'm all in. And this movie was just off the wall, offbeat, and enjoyable the whole time. If we're only doing 3, I'm going to say the next movie for me, which hasn't been mentioned before, because I have The Woman King and on my list as well. I'd say The Batman was a great movie this year, which came out way earlier in the year. And I was one of the naysayers on Robert Pattinson in this role, but he really filled in the shoes well. It was a great story. The interplay between him and Zoe Kravitz was compelling. And to see Colin Farrell, who's going to turn up on my list again before the night is out, as the Penguin was, I mean, incredible casting, because you could not see that it was him, but just a magnificent performance. So the Batman, that's 3 for me.
All right, and Wilson Morales, you're up. So, what three are you going to mention that we haven't already talked about?
Well, you guys have mentioned two of the movies already. One is definitely Top Gun. If there was a movie that lived up to expectations, this was the movie. At a time when Paramount was farming off all of their movies during the pandemic, because maybe they didn't have the money for marketing or whatever, they even gave away Eddie Murphy's Coming to America. Now, even though the movie was not well received, you did not know that then. Eddie Murphy is still a cash cow. You say, even though, so it would have definitely made money opening weekend any other given year before the reviews come out and so forth. But so Tom Cruise is like, hold, came out that movie, hold, keep it in theaters, hold, keep it in theaters. It is at $1.45 billion, only movie ever to be number one during Memorial Day weekend and then Labor Day weekend. That's how long of a stretch it is. That's not people watching it the first time. That's people going back second, to, and it wasn't just Tom Cruise, the ensemble. Tom Cruise is the catalyst. Obviously, he's one of the reasons you're going to go see it. It's nostalgia, but I like how they gave the ensemble of young actors a good chance to shine. Jay Ellis, most people know him from TV. So this was his breakout role on film. So Tom Cruise was one. Second one, The Woman King. In terms of you want to see Gina do a big action film. We saw what she could do with the Old Guard. Now, and you can't tell by the numbers because Netflix doesn't put those things out. But I think a little over 70 million people watched Old Guard within a certain time frame. Here you got Viola Davis, and you got a slew of young actresses, and all of the cylinders are working on that movie, from the cinematography to the score to the costume design. It plays well. Story gets a little predictable at the end, but you still want to be entertained, and that's what you got. Speaking of entertainment, my third film, RRR. Here's a movie that's been talked about for the longest time, and I was like, what are people talking about? I said, don't wait. And then I got an email that they were going to play it in the theaters, and I go check it out. There were 80 people online, and I'm thinking, like, oh, maybe, this is, they're going to, no. They were like, Wilson, you can just come on in. We got you. And then what's this line for? That's the overflow line. I'm like, what? I walk in there. Now, this is months after it's been played on Netflix. Somebody goes, the moderator goes, because there was going to be a Q&A with the director. He goes, by show of hands, how many people have seen this already? Practically 2/3 of the audience. And then he goes, which is I thought was weird. He goes, how many people have seen this more than once, more than 3 times? Not just a second time, not a third time, but a second. He said more than 3 times. Now we're talking a movie that's 3 hours.
3 hours long, yeah.
And 2/3 rose their hand. I'm like, are you serious? One guy said he's seen it 14 times. I see this movie from start to finish. You see it on a big screen. This movie just captures you all the way. It's from India. I think it's India's second highest grossing movie. The song that's got shortlisted for the Oscars, I looked on YouTube, the song itself from this movie, 108 million views. Enough said. Tim?
Hey, man, look, I'm laughing because Wilson, of course, doesn't follow good instructions, but he makes good radio. I said at the beginning, Charles, give me 3 movies we haven't talked about. He talked about 2 we did, and he brought RRR to the table. RRR is a film we did not review on this show, but I have watched that film. I would say, I think I just watched it for either the 5th or 6th time. Because every time people come to my house, I'm always like, you need to watch this movie. So we had another group of people at the house for Christmas, and we watched it again. It is, and people always say, well, explain what it is. And I go, man, it's a wild ride, man. It's like Bollywood, musical, action. It's the action at the end and the final 15, 20 minutes where a guy spins a motorcycle around and throws it.
It's like watching a Shaw Brothers movie, you know, and all these other components. You know who the Shaw Brothers are, right?
I do.
You know,
That
it's
is
like
funny, man. But
you know, it's like watching one of these Shaw Brothers movies. Like you're just gonna get acrobatic action left and right, nonstop. You know, it just doesn't stop. And you're just looking at there's certain scenes out there where you're like, "Are you kidding me?" And you're like, "Wow!" in amazement.
I just have a question to ask because I finally asked this question after the fifth or sixth time, Charles and Wilson, after watching it. If the character's leg was jacked up when he was in the trapped in the cage, and my man puts him on his shoulder, how suddenly later on is he able to just run around? And I was like, man, just don't even
Adrenaline, baby,
just let it
adrenaline.
go.
Mentally, he said to himself, you know,
I gotta do it.
you know, he thought he was thinking of the movie Scarface.
The characters
like,
were Beam, and Ron, right? Am I close? Beam and Ron?
like that. Depending on what you watch. If you watch it on Netflix,
I was gonna say whichever dub version you get.
whatever your dub version you get, you're getting Milo and Cyrus, or you're getting Tom and John, or you're getting, you know, Biscuit and Buffett.
Well, you know what, man? Any way you slice it, man, RRR is a solid pick for anybody's list. I'm gonna give you three more, man, off my list, and you're gonna look at me. First of all, I'm just gonna throw in the Banshees of Inisherin, which I thought was Colin Farrell and Brendan. Is it Brendan Gleeson? And
yes,
Brendan Gleeson
done a movie. The thing that I got out of watching this movie is if you go back and find Calvary from 2014, he literally uses the exact same set of actors. They shoot it in almost the exact same place. And Martin McDonagh is really good at what he does, man. I mean, you know, I know a lot of Americans know him for 3 Billboards in Ebbing, Missouri, but you got to go back and look at McDonagh's work, man. He is a really strong storyteller. And this story that he comes up with is just so extreme that it's good. So I put that in as one of the films on my list. I had the Batman on my list, Charles, so that was a good pick. I took The Outfit. I think a lot of people forgot about that movie earlier this year. And I put The Outfit on my list. And I'm going to let one of y'all other ones take this other movie that's off my list. But I will just say that Sydney, which I tipped a little earlier, the documentary about Sidney Poitier. I went to the world premiere of that up at TIFF. That was really, really, really well done. And the fact that Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry came to support that, I thought that was a good turnout along with the Poitier family. But Sidney Poitier is a giant, man. And to watch his story kind of unspool on screen, Harry Belafonte is a huge part of that doc. So to give Sidney his flowers, you know, a little after the fact, but everybody knew, Sidney knew how much he meant to everybody and how loved he was. And you see it spill out in that documentary, man. There's so much love on the screen, telling the story of a one-of-a-kind actor, a one-of-a-kind activist, a one-of-a-kind presence on the big screen, Sir Sidney Poitier. So that's my three. So anybody else have any other random threes? Because we've kind of gone over. We haven't formed like a 10, but you know, you got three.
Yeah,
I got three.
I would say I have a couple of you know, I have Louis Armstrong's Black and White. You know, for just as much as we talk about Sydney, you know, you've got Louis Armstrong's, and it's always good to know, you know, the guys of yesteryear. That you don't want to just you don't want them just being a name like, oh, you've heard of the name. To see their work and how they were in their prime, just like what you got out of Sydney, you get that out of Louis Armstrong. You know, so that was one documentary. Another one, I liked Avatar: The Way of the Water. You know, it's been over a decade. We've been waiting for this for a long time. You know, and I want to be, you know, I'm all about being entertained. I'm all about being entertained. I'm not going to go out there and be like, you know, who's behind the blue face? I'm like, at the end of the day, you give me a screener right there. I'm like, I'm going to sit there and watch it. I'm going to sit there and watch it, you know? And then what's a third film I have in there? You know, I'll give, I like to see when new directors are coming into the game, and I'm thinking of Elegance Bratton, the inspection. The story, it's told by him. It's I'm a little leery in some areas because I think somebody's first film is their albatross. Like they want to get it out. It's like doing your first book, your first album. You're putting a lot of your story into the music, the words. Here it is on film. So, but it's nicely crafted, well done. Obviously, you got the right guy, Jeremy Pope. He got Gabrielle Union to be looked at in a different way from people who don't really know her. For the most part, we see Gabrielle Union and people think about, bringing on. I'm like, no, she, over time, which is now 20 plus years, she's definitely done some strong work, Be Your Mary Jane. But on the big screen, this puts her in a new lane, and hopefully she can find other roles similar to this, Elegance Bratton's the director. So I'd like to see what he does next. So I always want to champion somebody new because I want to say, okay, what's your next thing? I don't want to see you on a milk carton and say, yo, he did a movie 4 or 5 years ago. And we all know it's hard for Black directors. We know it's hard for Black directors. So hopefully
I'm sorry,
he's
man.
got another.
I had a joke, Wilson, but I was like, it would just be crass because you said being on the milk carton. I call it the Matty Rich effect. You don't want to
stop. Matty Rich been working. Matty Rich been working. So you hating. You see, you naming people. You naming people of the Matty Rich
Theodore
effect.
Witcher effect. You don't want to have that happen.
Wow.
What's the sister Leslie Harris? There was a slew of people who made films in the 90s who still are working. They're still working, doing television, aka Ernest Dickerson and those kinds of folks. But Wilson, come on, man, I'm not just I'm making light of it to prove a point. It's not trying to be funny. Matty Rich, I remember the controversy with him is he talked about how Wilson, I don't know if you remember this, he was doing a bunch of interviews where he was talking about, man, film school is overrated, man. I don't need no film school. And I remember Spike Lee was like, yo. So all I know is Spike Lee is still making movies. I'm not going to say the rest. So look at Wilson. Wilson is friends with Matty, so he can't say anything.
No, I'm not saying. I'm not friends with Matty. He's been around. He's doing work. Maybe I think sometimes I wonder whether or not they go by pseudonyms. But I don't know. Hey, where's Hype Williams? Hype Williams did Belly.
Hype Williams did Belly, right. I'm just saying there was a lot of I'm not gonna call it one and done. There was a lot of really short careers. Mario Van Peebles survived from that time. Trying to think. Of course, Spike and John Singleton were able to break through and get out. But there were a lot of directors, man. I just literally watched Wilson. Wilson probably has never heard of this movie before. From 1991, Perfume by Roland Jefferson, which I hated in 1991. But when I watched it a couple of days ago, I was like, maybe I was just being a little harsh.
Let me be finding these movies that my dad will find at the local bodega, one of those bins.
It's a seminal year in Black film. Boys in the Hood, New Jack City, Daughters of the Dust. There was 16 to 18 movies made by Black directors in 1991.
I know that. I know it well.
Yeah. Now some of them were really bad. Up Against the Wall, Talking Dirty After Dark, Perfume. These movies weren't really that good. Oh, what was the other one? Hanging with the Homeboys.
Hanging with the Homeboys. That was not bad.
That was no. I don't think Talking Dirty was all that bad.
Hanging with
Papa Caru's Talking Dirty After Dark.
Wasn't that bad?
Okay. The platinum standard of 1991 are 3 movies: Boys in the Hood, and actually, did Spike have them?
Five Heartbeats?
Was Jungle Fever 91?
It was.
Okay, so you can add Jungle Fever in it. So Jungle Fever, New Jack City, Boys in the Hood, and Daughters of the Dust clearly to me are the best 4 movies that came out in 1991.
What about the 5 Heartbeats? Really?
Yeah.
The 5 Heartbeats?
I thought 5 Heartbeats came out in 90. I don't think that's a 91 movie.
It was
you sure?
City?
You sure?
Yes.
Hold on a second. Let me double check that because I'm telling you, man, that
I did the Clubhouse reunion.
Well, I'm not paying any attention because you did the reunion, man.
No, but I did it on. I did the reunion
why are you
on its
doubting
30th
Wilson?
anniversary.
In
What's
'91,
this,
he's
man? I'm just saying, man, because I love Wilson, but I don't remember that being because if it is, oh, you okay? My apologies, Wilson. I take that back. So there's 5 movies from that year that I liked a lot, and To Sleep with Anger came out in '90, so I'm getting those two
No,
confused.
is New Jack City in there? You said? Did you mention New
I
Jack
said
City?
New Jack City, Boys in the Hood, Jungle Fever, Julie Dash's movie, Daughters of Dust, and this 5th one, The Five Heartbeats. So
What about that movie with Halle Berry? That movie with Halle Berry that came out towards the end.
You talking about the one with her and Tommy Davidson and no. Any movie that has a redhead, what is it? What was the boy, the rapper's name? Redhead Kingpin. Any movie that Redhead Kingpin is in is like Stoney Jackson. Those two are like if those guys show up in your movie's not good. So
Living Large. Living Large.
Living Large was not good. Living Large was not good.
Oh, Bill Duke had a movie.
Okay, and it was that came out in '92. Deep Cover came out in '92.
No, A Rage in Harlem.
A Rage in Harlem.
91.
I mean, it's 91. I'm just, you hear me like.
That's because
did you like Rage in Harlem?
Not
really. I just mentioned it. That's all I said is just mention it. I didn't have to say I liked it.
So that's not. I'm not saying whether you liked it or not. No, okay. I mean, but 1991. These are really good conversations because I think that was the first time, Wilson, we had seen that in almost like 15 to 20 years that we had that deep of a lineup, and we thought at that point that would be the kickoff and the resurgence of more work for Black actors. And the problem we ran into is that the one movie that was the breakout movie in 1991 was Boys in the Hood, and every studio tried to copy that movie. So you ended up with Menace to Society, South Central, like all these knockoff movies. Wilson didn't mention films like Drop Squad that came out in '94 and some other.
Was that the one executive produced by Spike Lee?
We're talking about '91. I was just saying, man, and when we started looking at Black films from the '90s, when we got the 2000s and we had this kickoff probably around 2010, you know, a lot of these directors have stuck, and we've seen the industry expand in a way that it did not in the early '90s. So we had a good start to the early '90s, but then, it kind of tempered off a little bit. So, but I've said all that to say, man. So yes, Wilson, you're absolutely correct. I apologize. I didn't get 1991's The Five Heartbeats, which was really, really a good movie. I like that movie. That movie was one of the movies when I first got in the game that helped put me on track. What were you about to say, Wilson?
I'm saying there was a documentary about the making of The Five Heartbeats and how it didn't make any money in the theaters. And at the time, because, you know, what helped a lot of Black movies was the bootleg movies and the DVDs and the VHSs. So that movie had a second life once it hit home video and people got to see it. You know, and that's all, you know, some movies, you know, they grow in time. And that was one of those movies that grew in time. They're like, oh, you got to check this movie out. And you wonder how come it didn't do well at the theaters. You know, that's all about marketing, whatever. You know, a lot of times, a lot of us probably, you know, grew up watching certain movies that we did not see in theaters. You watched at home because they kept playing it over and over again. You know, I never grew up watching any of these kung fu movies because they was on TV. But those are the memories we have. You know, so like a lot of these movies, you know, played on TV, and you know, every generation has its favorites as far as what they watched. Obviously, for us, it's like, you know, people say, "Oh yeah, we grew up on, you know, Brady Bunch," because that was all that was on TV. You know, to the new generation, today's generation, they're watching. They've got a lot more variety out there, as opposed to like, you know, we all know every episode of, you know, Archie Bunker and Brady Bunch because that's all we had.
Well, so. It's interesting, Charles. I wanted you to just listen to Wilson kind of wax nostalgic about television in the 70s, but he wasn't going to the movies in the 70s. Do you ever notice that? that Wilson will
Because
tell you about television shows from a time period to infer that he was too young to see these movies from the 1970s.
That
I think I was under 10. I'm not like you, Tim. You got 20 decades. You got 2 decades on me.
People would be surprised to know that Wilson and I probably went to the same high school, and
You know,
I
so
might have been a senior.
we did go to the high school.
By
You
how
were there
many
2
years,
decades before
Tim?
me.
What's that, Charles?
Separated by how many years? I mean, what's your graduating class and his?
Man, Wilson won't tell you what his graduating class is. Then they'll put him on blast. So
Tim was like, I went to school with Eisenhower. I was like, oh, okay.
Wow. No, but I'm just saying, man, it's funny. I think a lot of what Wilson and Charles tease me about is that I have an insatiable need to watch movies. So I'll sit here. You can look behind
We
me.
do. No,
In my
you
office.
I
know,
don't think
seriously.
that's what we said at all. I don't think anybody said anything about watching.
No, but I'm saying there are movies I've
about how
seen.
much time in your life you've had.
No, let me finish. There are movies that I've seen from a time period that I didn't see in the theaters. I watch them like I watch them now, right behind me when I'm in my office doing work. So I'll put on. I'm not going to tell you what channel, but I'll put on the channel and it'll give me suggestions of other movies to watch. So I'm finding and discovering movies all the time. So I was watching a series of Jane Kennedy movies the other day. A movie I'd never heard of called Big Time from 1977. I never saw that in the theater. Never heard of it until like 2 days ago. So that's all I would tell Wilson. I know Wilson is a brother I respect and is a journalist, and he is breaking stories left and right. Wilson spends so much time breaking stories and doing theater and all the other stuff he does. Wilson does not get a chance to go back and really rewatch these classic films.
Now, so sometimes I do. I just don't watch them as often as you do. But I go back every now and then.
What's the last classic movie you watched, Wilson?
If you're gonna watch RRR 4 times, you don't have time to watch something else.
Wilson had to see RRR 4 times.
The last classic I saw was a 1944 movie called Laura by Otto Preminger.
Okay, good choice. I like that. Charles, what's the last classic movie you watched?
It's a Wonderful Life was on TV the other night.
What's the last classic movie you watched other than that? Because that movie everybody watches. That's not even a feather in your cap to say I watched It's a Wonderful Life.
Well, I did watch Vertigo the other day because I was inspired by a movie on my top 10 list that I had to go watch and compare it to.
Okay.
You know what's a good movie? 7 Days in May.
7 Days in May is a good movie. I've seen that. I've seen that. So, I mean, like I said, man, I'm just the guy who I get teased at home all the time because I'm always watching movies, man.
And 2 weeks ago, I saw for the first time, damn, why am I going? It's a 3-hour movie, the 3-hour Jewish movie from the 60s. Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay, Zero Mostel.
Yes. So for the first time, I was at a friend's house. They were watching it. My friends are a bit older, and I was like, and I didn't know it was 3 hours. I'm like, okay. Then once I saw it, I was like, they were like, "Well, so you gonna watch all of it?" I'm like, oh, man, I'm just visiting here. So then I look on my phone, and my friend goes, "Don't you dare go to Wikipedia." I was trying to see, to get.
Man. It's so funny, man, because I spend a lot of time, as Charles knows, watching Turner Classic Movies, man. So as a hobby.
You're not supposed to say the station, dude.
Well, that's true. Well, I was going to say, I spend a lot of time watching that station because I'm always intimately going to find out if they have something that I've never seen before. And I'll kind of poke around and watch some of those movies. But yeah, man, I think, all joking aside, I think it's very, very important for not just the people that are on this podcast, but for film critics to watch older movies.
Yeah, it's very important.
Now, the other thing, Wilson and Charles, is a couple of days ago, Variety put out a list of their top 100 movies, which I was at the gym when I saw it, and I was like, yeah, this is BS. And I knew it was BS before I even opened it up because movies are subjective, man. And the fact that they had 4 movies from Black directors out of 100 was part of the BS. That was number one. And then they had several movies that I would never I personally would never have put on my list. And I was like, they were either too current, too broad. I was like, nah. I mean, so Charles and I know Wilson, we probably don't have this conversation often, but people always ask me about what are my top 5 films. And there's like 3 of them are like, well, actually, 4 of them are almost like a cinch. Anytime you ask me my top 5 films, it's always going to be Godfather, Godfather 2, On the Waterfront, and Citizen Kane. Those 4 movies will forever be on my top 5 list because those movies are amazing from a technical standpoint and what they absolutely mean. And The Godfather, I've watched that movie. I can't even tell you. It's triple digits. How many times I watched both The Godfather?
Friend's 14-year-old son just started watching it, and she calls me up because he goes, my son just watched it. I just allowed my son to watch it, and for whatever reason, he's on his 4th viewing in 2 days.
Bro, The Godfather, I think it's one of the few movies, Wilson, I've ever seen where there's not one wasted scene in either of those movies. Like, all those scenes work. It's the acting, it's the writing, it's Francis Ford Coppola's storytelling, it's Nino Rota's score. I mean, like, the whole thing just works. And the same thing, I think, with Citizen Kane. For a film that came out in 1941 and is like 80, 90 years old, that movie is, from a technical standpoint, Orson Welles knocked that out the box. And finally, for On the Waterfront, man, it's Brando at his absolute best. He's a guy who literally didn't create method acting, but he took method acting to a place that has inspired everybody from Denzel to Al Pacino to Robert De Niro to like anybody, Daniel Day-Lewis, anybody in the game that we think that's a really good actor are all inspired by Marlon Brando. And that film in 1954 is kind of his magnus opus, man. That is such an amazing performance in On the Waterfront, man. And I talk about it all the time. So, fellas, I'm sorry, man. I'm on my Wayback Machine moment with my classic films. I would ask you what your top 5 are. I mean, if Kevin McCarthy was here, he would tell me Transformers, and I would look at him like, come on, dude. Transformers is in your top 5 all time? And I would also probably add A Raisin in the Sun.
Romance. He's going to say that's on there.
I was going to say, I'd also add Sidney Poitier's A Raisin in the Sun, which I think is his best performance of all the performances he ever did. I loved him as Walter Lee Younger in that Lorraine Hansberry film more than anything else he ever did. And we probably need to do a show about that one day where we just take an artist and debate, like, what's their best performance? Like, what's Denzel's best performance? I have my pick. I know. You don't have your favorite Denzel performance from any film?
I thought I said that was like near impossible to do.
No, I said it's impossible to pick a movie, but I can pick a performance. And and matter of fact, not just pick it, I can tell you when in the movie it happens over a certain stretch. And that would be Malcolm X, starting in hour 2 to the close of the film. That is the best acting Denzel Washington has ever done.
What was his name? What was his character name in Waiting to Exhale?
Go ahead, Charles. Just ignore it. That's Wilson trying to be funny. Denzel Washington was in Waiting to Exhale. So I just want people at home. That's why I froze. So people at home watching this and go, what? What was Wesley Snipes' character in Waiting to Exhale? Yeah, don't try, man. Nobody knows. I mean, he's not even credited. Like, if you look at the credits, you wouldn't even know Wesley Snipes was in Waiting to Exhale. So, but yeah, man. But I said all that to say, man, as we're gonna wrap it up and bring it back home, that I think we probably need to spend more time. We talk about all the contemporary films, man, but we need to put these films into their proper place. You know, in The Fabelmans, you have that great scene at the end with John Ford, where he's in the office with all these Oscars. John Ford, I'm not going to say is the greatest director. He might be the most celebrated one, but John Ford made some amazing films, man. The Informer, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, The Quiet Man, Searchers. I mean, he's just a rack of like very influential movies. People talk about Hitchcock and Akira Kurosawa, and you know, you can go on and on. Billy Wilder. There's so many really good directors from that period. Wilson, and I know you don't pay a lot of attention to that period, but that is the foundation of film, man. Before you get
I
to
saw
a
the Searchers.
Spielberg
My
and a
first
Lucas.
year in college, I saw the Searchers. You know, I was introduced to the Searchers. Natalie Wood, John Wayne. You know,
And Charles is quiet. Okay, I'm listening. Charles,
he ain't got
got
nothing.
nothing on this.
He didn't get his VHS tapes to the mid-90s. You know,
Sorry, I think I missed the whole question.
Oh no,
Did
you
you have a
didn't miss the whole
in the
question. You
70s?
had nothing to contribute. That's why you silent over there. So no, I'm just saying that these directors, I always tell people, it's funny because I was watching a Man Named Otto today, which I'll have a review up a little later this week. And it's directed by the same guy, I think his name is Mark Forster, who did A Monster's Ball, the one that Halle Berry won her Oscar. He did several other movies. But you start looking at directors, and it helps you on your film journey. And I think part of what we should do from now on, Wilson and Charles, is when we recommend movies to people, don't recommend the movie, recommend a director that they should follow. And then that way you start to develop a sense of a style. Like if you said, watch some Spike Lee movies, you get a certain style and filter from the way Spike Lee tells stories, which is very different than how Martin Scorsese tells stories, or how Christopher Nolan tells stories, or how Steven Spielberg tells stories, and on and on and on. All right, it's quiet. It's quiet. And I'll end by saying that don't watch any Terrence Malick films because I don't like the way Terrence Malick tells stories. I'm just keeping it 100.
As long as he has from 5
I'm trying to figure out how we got into from the top 10 of 2022 into the best directors of all time. I'm like, what's going on?
I'm sorry, man. I'll take it back to 2022. We got about 8 minutes to go.
Oh, we gotta wrap up. We gotta wrap up soon.
Yeah, we got 8 minutes to go. I would say that we talked about films, but I'll also talk about performances. I think Brendan Fraser's performance in The Whale, I'm not sure how good of a film The Whale is. I think Brendan Fraser is money in that movie. I think he's really, really good. I think that Viola Davis gives one of the best performances of her career as Naniska in The Woman King. Wilson already talked about Gabrielle Union in The Inspection, and also Kate Blanchett in Tar, I think is really, really good. Are there any performances that jump out for either of you? Wilson, I'll start with you.
Austin Butler and Elvis. I have to say that, like, having watched that movie again, and while Colin Farrell is good and Brendan Fraser is good, Brendan Fraser is he's just sitting in a fat suit throughout the whole time, you know. Take out the fat suit, I'm like, okay, what more do you got? You're talking about Austin Butler, who had to spend nearly a year and then some, because remember that they were filming that at the height of pandemic, which is when Tom was the first one to get COVID. And to stay in stride and learn to be Elvis, sing like Elvis, talk like Elvis, you know, takes a lot in there. That's a performance. That's a physical performance. You got a hand in there. Colin Farrell's had a good year. You know, he's had 4 films this year, from The Banshees to After Yang to Batman to 13 Lives. That, you know, each role is totally different from the other, and that he was equally good. But you know, in terms of performances, Danielle Deadwyler, you know, it's not that often you get an actress coming out the gate. Because to be honest with you, she was in The Harder They Fall, but nobody remembers her so much because most of the spotlight went to Regina King and Zazie Beetz, along with Idris Elba and Lakeith Stanfield. There's always going to be somebody in that group that doesn't get that much fanfare, you know? And so she was, I wouldn't say new, but she was the least likely to be known within that group.
Got you.
But now people will know who she is based on her performance until.
All right, and Charles, we got 6 minutes, man. Wilson, you get some water or something, bro. Charles, any performances that jump out to you that we haven't talked about?
I mean, I don't think I can add to too many of the performances. I do think Michelle Yeoh was impressive in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and so was I can't think of the girl who was the best supporting actor. But I can talk about directors. We have Chinonwe Chukwu, who was
Chinoye Chukwu.
Who with her movie Nanny this year was very impressive.
Yeah.
Elegance Bratton, you say, as we talked about, as Inspection was another impressive directorial performance. And then you got to give it up for people, the old guard. Steven Spielberg turned in a wonderful film with The Fabelmans this year. So we got a lot of great directorial efforts this year, if I may be able to say that. So
and don't forget our girl Gina, man.
And I was going to say Gina Prince Bythewood for The Woman King. Again, a phenomenal performance from a director this year. I don't know why you guys didn't mention Tom Cruise in acting performance for what he did with Top Gun, but there's a lot of good stuff this year.
Well, it really was, man. We got about 4 minutes, man. So, is there any one memory, Wilson, that sticks out from 2022 as we about to close the book on the year and move into just a series of stank-a-dank January movies, because it happens every year.
I want to give, I'm hoping that Tyler Perry can pick up from what he did from A Jasmine's Blues.
Yes.
And next project is going to be, I think, a heavy one. It's about the Black female soldiers that was in the war. No, Black women that were in the war. I think it's called 8666 or something like that he's going to be directing. And, having seen, I guess, all of his movies, say what you want about the Medea movies and, the writing and so forth. For the Jasmine Blues, which was something that he had put together eons ago, and now it got it to fruition to come on the big screen. For it to go to Toronto, he was basically reinventing himself to a whole new audience. Because I saw it not part of the press screening, as far as I saw the regular public, who were now being introduced to Toronto. These are Canadians out there, and they're seeing a movie. They're seeing a solid movie. And he's being reintroduced to them as like, oh, okay, now granted, they're going to read up on all the stuff he's done before. If he can follow that up, because a lot of times you can change and reinvent yourself if there's a certain level of consistency. You think about Eddie Murphy, and, he does Dreamgirls, was destined to win, but then Norbit comes out and they're like, oh, he went back to doing the silly thing. I think, and it's harder for comedians to change, to get respect, which is why a lot of them don't win or get recognized. Robin Williams had to do a series of serious movies, Awakenings. Obviously he won for Dead Poets Society, Good Night Vietnam, before they're like, oh, this guy can act. Adam Sandler is trying to get in that realm right now with Hustle. And being, it's like, you got to get people's opinion. Jim Carrey, he did the Man Over the Moon, I think it was, and then he never really followed it up. He went back to being the funny guy, because a lot of times, your team is not going to want to let you do something that's going to pay them less. They want you go back to going back to Reginald Hudson when he did Boomerang. Nobody wanted Eddie Murphy to do that because that was not going to make him the classic funny guy that he had been doing well with, but Eddie Murphy wanted to do something different, and he kept his game up, so it's, so with Tyler Perry, and so going back to Tyler Perry, I just hope that, with the newfound audience he hopefully got from A Jasmine's Blues can gain him a certain level of respect. So when that next film comes out, we're ready for it, because we know what he can deliver.
All right. Well, I think unfortunately, Charles, he's gonna have to have the last word, because we're right up against the clock for time. Thank you, Wilson Morales. It's always a pleasure to have you. Charles Kirkland, I'll hear we can talk about yours over at lunch tomorrow.
I just gotta say this before we go. If you have not seen Decision to Leave, you need to see that. That's a Korean Park Chan-wook's. When I talked about Vertigo, this was what reminded me of Vertigo. This movie is incredible. It's only like 2 hours and 20 minutes long, but it's a powerful movie. And Korean cinema is just doing some wonderful things in the last few years. So if you have not seen Decision to Leave, you need to check it out.
All right. Well, that wraps up 2022 for our show. Wilson Morales, always a pleasure, brother. Anytime you're here with us, man. Tell people where they can read your stuff at, Wilson.
You can find it over at blackfilmandtv.com. You can also find me on social media on IG at Wilson Morales Film, and then on Twitter at WMorales_BFTV.
All right. And Charles, what about where people can read your stuff?
You can read my stuff at thefilmgordon.com.
All right. And me too. As we tell you guys in closing, please see something good at the movies. Please take care of yourself. Have a happy new year, and we will see you on the other side, God willing, in 2023. You guys take care and enjoy your holiday. Fellas, it's been a pleasure, man. Let's do it again next year.
All right. Take care, folks.
All right. You guys take care, man.